Get ready, Dasha. Your business belongs to me now, and tomorrow you're leaving this apartment, shouted her husband. But there was something he didn't know. His wife had sensed everything in advance and secretly signed a very important document. The next morning, when he entered his office, what he saw made him freeze in shock. Before we continue, don't forget to write in the comments which country you're from and how old you are. Enjoy listening. The city skyline blazed with the fiery hues of dusk, a sprawling canvas of steel and glass that stretched endlessly before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Dasha's penthouse. The apartment, perched on the 42nd floor of one of the city's most exclusive towers, was a masterpiece of modern elegance. Polished marble floors gleamed under soft, recessed lighting. Sleek, minimalist furniture exuded understated wealth, and abstract paintings, each one hand-picked by Dasha, adorned the walls, their bold strokes mirroring her own unyielding spirit. The air inside was heavy, charged with an electric tension that seemed to pulse in the silence, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Dasha stood by the window, her silhouette sharp against the fading light, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders like a cascade of molten copper. Her arms were crossed, her posture rigid yet composed, a woman bracing for a storm she had long seen gathering on the horizon. Across the room, Victor paced with the restless energy of a predator closing in on its prey. His tailored suit, usually pristine, was slightly rumpled from a day spent weaving his web of deceit. His dark eyes glinted with a volatile mix of arrogance and malice, and his lips curled into a sneer that he wore like a crown. He stopped abruptly, turning to face her, his voice slicing through the quiet like a sharpened blade. "Get ready, Dasha," he spat, his words dripping with venom, each syllable calculated to wound. "Your business belongs to me now, and tomorrow you're leaving this apartment." The declaration was meant to shatter her, to reduce her to the trembling, defeated woman he had always wanted her to be. Victor expected her to crumble, to plead, to reveal the vulnerability he was certain lurked beneath her polished exterior. He had spent years resenting her strength, her brilliance, the way she commanded attention without ever raising her voice. But Dasha didn't move. She didn't flinch. Slowly, she turned from the window, her emerald eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his smirk falter for a fleeting moment. There was no fear in her gaze, no hint of the broken spirit he had hoped to see. Instead, there was something else, something cold, calculating, and utterly unshakable, like the calm at the heart of a hurricane. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said, her voice soft, but laced with a quiet menace that seemed to reverberate through the room. It wasn't a question, but a statement, delivered with the certainty of someone who held a secret too dangerous to reveal. "You always underestimate me, Victor." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed off the marble floors and glass walls, a sound meant to dismiss her, to assert his dominance. "Underestimate? You've got nothing left, Dasha. No money, no allies, no moves to make. I've made sure of that. The company is mine, and this apartment?" He gestured around the room, his hand sweeping over the space as if claiming it for himself, his fingers brushing the air with possessive confidence. "It's in my name. Pack your bags." Dasha's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, one that seemed to unsettle Victor more than any words could. It was the smile of someone who knew something he didn't, someone who held a trump card he hadn't even considered. The air between them crackled with unspoken truths, and for a moment Victor's confidence wavered, though he quickly masked it with another sneer. "We'll see," Dasha said simply, her tone calm but carrying an edge that lingered like the aftertaste of bitter wine. Without another word, she turned back to the window, dismissing him as if he were no more significant than a fleeting shadow cast by the setting sun. Victor's face twisted with rage. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by her. For years, he had lived in her shadow, seething with resentment at her brilliance, her success, her ability to command a room with a single glance. Dasha Volkov was a force, a tech visionary who had built Volkov Tech from nothing, turning a small startup into a powerhouse that rivaled industry giants. Her software had revolutionized data processing. Her algorithms were the backbone of Fortune 500 companies, and her name was synonymous with innovation. Victor, her husband of 5 years, was a financier, a man who made money by moving money, never creating anything tangible. To him, Dasha's success was a constant reminder of his own inadequacy, a wound that festered with every headline she graced, every keynote she delivered. This was his moment, his chance to take everything she had built and claim it as his own. He had spent months orchestrating the takeover, bribing board members, forging documents, and aligning himself with lawyers who cared more about their bank accounts than their ethics. He was certain he had covered every angle, anticipated every countermove. Dasha was finished, or so he thought. He stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him with a force that rattled the windows, the sound reverberating through the space like a gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening, but Dasha remained still, her reflection in the glass unwavering, her eyes fixed on the city below. She wasn't the broken woman Victor imagined her to be. She had seen this coming long before his smug declaration, long before his betrayal took shape. For months, she had watched him, piecing together the puzzle of his deceit with a precision that rivaled her work in the tech world. Every late-night phone call he thought she didn't hear, every secretive meeting he claimed was just business, every glance he avoided when she asked about the company, she had cataloged it all. Victor thought he was playing her, but Dasha was the one playing chess while he fumbled with checkers. She had always been 3 steps ahead, and now, as the city lights began to twinkle below, she was ready to make her move. 7 months earlier, the first whisper of betrayal had reached Dasha's ears. It came from Marcus, her chief operating officer, and one of the few people she trusted implicitly. They were in her office late one evening, the city's skyline a backdrop to their conversation, when Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Victor's been meeting with board members," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. "I don't know what he's planning, but it's not good. He's been too quiet, too deliberate. I saw him with Richard Grayson last week, and they stopped talking the moment I walked into the room." Dasha had nodded, her expression unreadable, her mind already racing. Richard Grayson was a board member known for his greed, A man who would sell his own principles for the right price. If Victor was meeting with him, it wasn't for a casual chat. "Keep an eye on him," she said, her voice steady. "And don't say a word to anyone. Not yet." From that moment, Dasha became a ghost in her own life, observing Victor with a detachment that allowed her to see every move he made. She noticed the way he lingered over his phone, angling the screen away from her when he thought she was nearby. She caught the faint smirk he wore when he thought she wasn't looking, the one that betrayed his confidence in his own cunning. She began to collect evidence, discreetly at first, then with increasing boldness as his betrayal took shape. Her office, tucked away in a corner of the penthouse, became her war room, a sanctuary where she could plan without fear of discovery. Behind a false panel in her desk, she kept a hard drive containing everything she needed: emails he had sent to board members, recordings of his calls, copies of forged documents that bore her signature but not her intent. Each piece was a brick in the wall she was building, a fortress to protect what was hers. She spent nights poring over the evidence, her eyes scanning lines of text, her ears attuned to the nuances in Victor's recorded voice. There was the call where he promised a board member a private yacht in exchange for their vote. There was the email where he outlined his plan to transfer company assets to a shell corporation he controlled. There was the forged memo, supposedly from Dasha, announcing her resignation. A document so poorly crafted it would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. She saved every file, encrypted every recording, and backed it all up to a secure cloud server that only she could access. But evidence alone wasn't enough. Victor was cunning, and he had powerful allies, men and women who saw Dasha's success as a threat to their own egos, their own empires. If she was going to outmaneuver him, she needed a plan so airtight it couldn't be undone, a strategy that would leave him with no room to fight back. That's when she turned to Elena, her oldest friend and a corporate attorney with a reputation for being ruthless in the boardroom. They had known each other since college, when they were two young women navigating a world that wasn't built for them. Elena had always been Dasha's confidant, her strategist, the one person who could match her intellect and her fire. They met in a quiet cafe on the edge of the city, far from the prying eyes of Victor's network. The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, its windows fogged with steam, its tables occupied by strangers who paid them no mind. Dasha slid a USB drive across the table, her expression grim but resolute. "He's planning to take everything," she said, her voice low, barely audible over the hum of conversation around them. "The company, the apartment, my reputation. He thinks he's untouchable." Elena's eyes gleamed with a mix of concern and excitement, her fingers closing around the USB drive as if it were a weapon. "Then we make sure he's not," she said, her voice steady. "What do you have?" Dasha tapped the drive. "Enough to bury him. Emails, recordings, documents, everything he's done to undermine me. But I need more than evidence. I need something he can't fight, something that'll hit him where it hurts." Elena leaned back, her mind already racing, her legal instincts kicking into high gear. "You need a document," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "A contract so ironclad it'll choke him when he realizes what you've done. Give me a week. and I'll give you a masterpiece." For the next 7 days, they worked in secret, meeting in obscure locations: a park bench at dawn, a rented office in a nondescript building, a corner booth in a diner that stayed open all night. They communicated through encrypted channels, using burner phones and coded messages to avoid detection. Elena drafted a series of legal maneuvers designed to protect Dasha's assets and ensure her control over Volkov Tech, no matter what Victor tried. The centerpiece was a shareholder agreement, a document that transferred a controlling interest in the company to a trust, with Dasha as the sole beneficiary. The trust was structured to activate only under specific conditions, conditions that Victor would unknowingly trigger when he attempted his takeover. It was a trap, meticulously designed to catch him off guard, like a spider's web spun with invisible threads, waiting for its prey to stumble into its embrace. The document was a work of art, its language precise and unyielding, its clauses impenetrable. It accounted for every possible loophole, every potential challenge Victor might raise. Elena had thought of everything: the board members' complicity, the forged documents, even the possibility that Victor might try to flee the country with company assets. The trust was backed by a secondary agreement that protected Dasha's personal assets, including the penthouse, which Victor had mistakenly believed was in his name. A clause in their prenuptial agreement, one he had signed without reading closely, ensured that the apartment remained hers, untouchable by his schemes. Elena had even included a contingency plan, a set of legal triggers that would activate if Victor tried to retaliate. It was a fortress of paperwork, a labyrinth of legalese that would trap him the moment he stepped inside. The hardest part was keeping it all hidden. Victor was paranoid, always checking her phone, her emails, her schedule. He had even hired someone to tail her, a man in a gray sedan who followed her to meetings and lingered outside her office. Dasha had spotted him almost immediately, his presence as obvious as a smudge on a clean window. She didn't confront him, didn't let on that she knew. Instead, she used his surveillance to her advantage, staging distractions to keep him occupied. She would leave her phone on the kitchen counter, open to innocuous emails, while she conducted her real work on a secure laptop in her office. She would take long, aimless drives through the city, leading the man in the gray sedan on a wild goose chase while she met Elena in secret. She played the part of the oblivious wife, letting Victor believe she was unaware of his schemes. She staged arguments, feigning distress over minor issues, a delayed project, a missed deadline, to lull him into complacency. She even let him see her cry once, her tears carefully calculated to make him think she was breaking under the pressure. All the while, she was signing documents, meeting with Elena, and setting the stage for her counterattack. She moved like a shadow, silent and unseen, her every action precise and deliberate, her every step a move in a game only she knew she was playing. The night after Victor's ultimatum, Dasha sat at her desk, the city's lights sprawling out before her like a map of possibilities. The penthouse was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint clink of her wine glass as she set it down. She poured herself a glass of red wine, the liquid catching the glow of her desk lamp, its deep crimson hue mirroring the fire in her heart. Her laptop was open, the screen displaying the final piece of her plan, the document. It was a masterpiece of legal engineering, signed and notarized, stored in a digital vault that only she and Elena could access. She scrolled through it one last time, her eyes lingering on the clauses that would undo Victor's schemes, the words that would secure her legacy. Tomorrow, when he walked into his office expecting to claim his victory, he would find himself facing a reality he couldn't comprehend. The thought made her smile, a rare moment of satisfaction in a battle that had consumed her for months. Volkov Tech wasn't just a business. It was her legacy, her life's work. She had founded it a decade ago, when she was barely out of college, armed with nothing but a brilliant mind and a relentless drive. She had coded the first prototype herself, a revolutionary software that streamlined data processing for corporations, cutting through inefficiencies like a scalpel. From there, Volkov Tech had grown into a tech powerhouse, its innovations sought after by governments, tech giants, and Fortune 500 companies. Dasha's name was synonymous with progress, her face gracing the covers of magazines, her speeches filling auditoriums with eager listeners. She had built an empire, not just of technology, but of ideas, of possibilities. Victor had never understood that. To him, Volkov Tech was a prize to be won, a trophy to display. To Dasha, it was a living thing, a testament to her vision, her resilience, her refusal to be anything less than extraordinary. Victor had always resented her success. He was a man who thrived on control, on the illusion of power. As a financier, he moved money from one account to another, profiting from the labor of others without ever creating anything himself. He saw Dasha's brilliance as a threat, a challenge to his own ego. For years, he had tried to dim her light, to make her smaller, to fit her into the box he thought a wife should occupy. But Dasha was no one's shadow. She had outsmarted competitors, navigated a cutthroat industry, and built an empire with her own hands. If Victor thought he could take it from her, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through the possibilities. What would Victor's face look like when he realized he'd lost? Would he scream, his voice echoing through the empty office? Would he beg, his pride crumbling as he pleaded for mercy? Would he try to fight back, only to find himself trapped in the web she had spun? She imagined his shock, his rage, the moment when he understood that she had outplayed him at his own game. The thought was almost enough to make her laugh, but she held it in, savoring the anticipation like a fine wine. She took another sip, the warmth of the liquid grounding her, and turned back to the window. The city was hers, and tomorrow, Victor would learn that she was not to be underestimated. The next morning, Victor strode into the headquarters of Volkov Tech with the confidence of a conqueror. His suit was impeccable, pressed to perfection, his tie a deep navy that matched his predatory smile. His posture radiated certainty, the swagger of a man who believed he had already won. The boardroom was waiting for him, filled with allies he had bribed or coerced into supporting his takeover, men and women who had sold their loyalty for promises of wealth and power. Today, he would officially assume control of Volkov Tech, and Dasha would be nothing more than a memory, a cautionary tale of a woman who flew too close to the sun and fell. He pushed open the glass doors to his office, expecting to see a stack of paperwork that would seal his victory. Contracts, board resolutions, the forged documents that would cement his control. Instead, he froze. The room was empty, eerily, unnaturally empty. His desk, usually cluttered with files, reports, and the detritus of his schemes, was bare except for a single envelope. His name was written on it in Dasha's elegant handwriting, each letter precise and deliberate, like a signature on a guillotine. For a moment, he hesitated, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. The office felt like a trap, the silence too heavy, the air too still, as if the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for him to make his move. But curiosity and arrogance got the better of him. He tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper, his fingers trembling slightly despite his resolve. As he read, his face drained of color, his breath catching in his throat. The document was a letter, signed by Dasha and countersigned by Elena, outlining the terms of the shareholder trust. It stated that, effective immediately, control of Volkov Tech had been transferred to a trust that Dasha alone controlled. The board members Victor had bribed. They had been served with legal notices that morning, exposing their involvement in his scheme and threatening legal action if they didn't comply with the trust's terms. The forged documents he had used to undermine Dasha, invalidated by a clause in the company's bylaws that he had overlooked in his haste, a clause buried so deep in the fine print that only someone as meticulous as Dasha would have found it. And the apartment? A separate agreement, hidden in the labyrinth of their prenuptial contract, ensured it remained in Dasha's name, untouchable by his schemes. His knees buckled, and he gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself, the paper slipping from his hands and drifting to the floor. This couldn't be happening. He had planned everything so carefully, covered every angle, accounted for every possibility. He had spent months building his strategy, bribing allies, forging documents, manipulating the board. How had she done this? How had she known? His mind raced, replaying every moment of the past 7 months, searching for the moment when he had slipped, when he had revealed his hand. But there was nothing. Dasha had been a ghost, moving through his life without leaving a trace, her every action concealed behind a mask of compliance. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his daze. It was a text from Dasha, 3 simple words that sent a chill down his spine. Check your email. With trembling hands, he opened his inbox, his fingers fumbling over the screen. There was a single message from Dasha, with a video attachment. He clicked play, and her face appeared, calm and composed, her emerald eyes piercing through the camera as if she could see him, as if she were standing in the room with him. "Hello, Victor," she said, her voice steady, almost gentle, but with an undercurrent of steel that made his stomach twist. "If you're watching this, you've found the letter. I'm sure you're wondering how this happened. Let me make it simple. You underestimated me. You thought you could take everything I've built, everything I am, and leave me with nothing. But I've been watching you, Victor. I've known about your plans for months, and now you're the one with nothing. The video cut to a montage of evidence, each frame a dagger to his heart. There were screenshots of his emails detailing his deals with board members. There were recordings of his calls, his voice promising bribes, threatening consequences, weaving his web of betrayal. There were copies of the forged documents, their flaws highlighted in red, their invalidity laid bare. It was a devastating compilation, each piece meticulously gathered, each frame a nail in the coffin of his ambitions. Dasha's voice continued, unyielding, her words cutting deeper with every syllable. You have two choices. You can fight me, and this evidence goes public. Your reputation, your career, your freedom, gone. Or you can walk away, leave the company, leave the apartment, leave my life. The choice is yours. The video ended, and Victor sank into his chair, his world collapsing around him. The office, once a symbol of his impending triumph, now felt like a tomb, its glass walls closing in, its silence suffocating. He had thought he was the predator, the one who held all the power, the one who would emerge victorious. But Dasha had been the hunter all along, her moves silent and deadly, her strategy flawless. He had underestimated her, and now he was paying the price. His hands shook as he stared at the blank screen, the weight of his defeat settling over him like a shroud. He had lost everything, his plans, his allies, his future, and Dasha had taken it all without ever raising her voice. Across town, Dasha stood in her apartment, watching the sunrise paint the skyline in shades of gold and crimson, the city waking up with a rhythm that matched her own pulse. The penthouse was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the coffee maker as it brewed her morning espresso. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elena, short and triumphant. It's done. He's out. Dasha smiled, a weight lifting from her shoulders, a sense of freedom washing over her like the morning light. Volkov Tech was safe, her legacy secure. Victor would slink away, tail between his legs, because he knew she held all the cards. The evidence she had gathered was enough to ruin him, his reputation, his career, his freedom, and he wasn't foolish enough to test her resolve. She had outsmarted him, outplayed him, and now she was free to chart her own course. But freedom wasn't enough for Dasha. She wasn't content to simply reclaim what was hers. Volkov Tech was just the beginning, a foundation for something even greater. She had plans, ambitious, audacious plans, to take her company to new heights, to redefine what was possible in the tech world. A new software platform, one that could revolutionize data security, was already taking shape in her mind, its code a puzzle she couldn't wait to solve. A partnership with a European conglomerate was on the horizon, a deal that would expand her reach across continents. And then there was the foundation she wanted to establish, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting women in tech, ensuring that no one else would have to fight the battles she had fought. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in months, Dasha felt unburdened, alive with purpose, her mind buzzing with ideas. She sipped her espresso, the warmth of the mug grounding her as she stood by the window, the city sprawling out before her like a canvas waiting to be painted. Somewhere, in the ruins of his own making, Victor would learn the cost of underestimating her. He would fade into obscurity, a footnote in her story, a man who thought he could dim her light and paid the price for his arrogance. But Dasha's story was far from over. She was Dasha Volkov, a woman who built empires, who turned betrayal into triumph, who thrived in the face of adversity. The world was about to see just how far she could go, and she was ready to show them.